All right, we'll get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Steve Jorson with Northeast Metro Climate Action. We are a volunteer-run community organization with members in White Bear, North Oaks, North St. Paul, Van Ness Heights, and Shoreview. Our mission is to raise awareness on the climate crisis by doing outreach events like this. And we also work with our elected representatives, both state and local, on climate action related policies. And we also do some other events within our communities, awareness on the climate crisis. For the last 1 year now, our events have all been on Zoom. Uh, and we're hoping to get back to in-person events again, hopefully by maybe the end of summer, see how all the numbers go here. But we've been we've been in existence for over 2 years and have been doing these monthly events. Um, Today's guest, we are very excited to be hosting Don Shelby, longtime WCCO TV anchorman, now very active in the climate movement with working with many organizations. Um, he's planning to go to the COP26, which is the Congress of Parties 26, which is the big climate event global climate meeting in Glasgow later this year, if we can have that held. And has been very active in a number of both local, national, and global climate events. And today's talk, Don's going to talk about climate crisis, or climate change, the crisis of 1,000 faces. So let's welcome Don Shelby. And again, if you have any questions, put those into the chat, or we can wait till the end of Don's talk and you can ask questions directly. So Don, there you go.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good evening, everyone. I ought to say long time no see. It's great to be back in front of people once again. And I'm just pleased to be a part of this, pleased to be part of any organization that is dedicating itself to informing itself. Whether that subject is racial justice, or whether it is climate change, or whether it's finance, I just love people who like to find out facts, because my entire life has been spent in that. I'm a lifelong 55-year career investigative reporter. You may know me better as an anchor on TV, but I started on WCCO TV, the I-Team. I started in 78, but I developed the investigative unit, the I-Team, back in 1980. That revolutionary approach of turning over rocks and reporting verifiable material fact earned that I-Team 5 national Emmys, 2 George Foster Peabody Awards, which are the Pulitzer Prize of broadcast journalism, and many state laws were changed as a result of our work. It was fulfilling, but it's not as fulfilling as the investigations I began back 30 years ago into the facts surrounding climate change, the science, the politics, the obstructionism inherent in any disruptive information I was compelled to share with the audience. In order to maintain the trust of that audience, though, is kind of a tricky thing, because not only do I have to make sure the facts were right, but that I didn't appear to be taking sides in a politicized world. And that was difficult, because the mere reporting of the facts on carbon density in the atmosphere caused by humans placed me squarely in the fuzzy-headed liberal socialist camp. And I remember that I was known by a competitor on WCCO AM, who was on another radio channel at the time that I was doing E-Day, which was for environment, energy, and economy. I became known as DFL Don, and he later became a congressman. His name was Jason, but he called me DFL Don because I seemed so liberal to him, because I believed that I could prove that the science was accurate on climate change. Now, when I began reporting on the well-established, and I mean well-established facts of climate change, because the original facts went back 200 years on what happens when carbon dioxide values increase in the atmosphere and cause the planet to warm. Those facts were indisputable because using the scientific method, they could be duplicated, or in the scientific method terminology, they could be replicated. And it advanced from a hypothesis to a theory. And I might just take an aside to talk about the problems of communication. If you say to an average person that you got a theory, that means you just got a guess, that you really don't have your facts. But when it comes to science, a theory is as close to fact as you possibly can come, that you have a 90% reliability on the truth of that. So as an example, electricity is just a theory, but that doesn't stop you from going in and flipping the switch and expecting a light to come on. You believe in that, even though I don't believe there's any room for belief in science any more than I think there is a belief system in math. That if I tell you 2 plus 2 is 4, you can think 2 plus 2 is 5, but I can show you with 4 apples that these 2 apples and these 2 apples equal 4 apples, and you can believe they're 5, but they're not. It's 4. And I ask, do you believe that 2 plus 2 is 4? And people say, yeah, I believe that. And I say, no, you don't believe that. You know that. There are things you can know that requires no belief whatsoever. Now, most people have some grasp on the effects of a warming planet, the associated warming with wet places becoming wetter and drier places becoming drier, more unusual weather events, brush and forest fires, melting North Polar ice cap, the melting of the Greenland glacier that's going to result in sea level rise. That grasp is to be expected, but it is only the first phase. It is the elementary phase of understanding what can happen in the near and long term of climate change, if we even have a long term, if we do nothing. But there's more to come. There will be knock-on effects that few people accept in cloistered laboratories and think tanks are sharing broadly with American people. So let me put it this way. Most people who misunderstand the IPCC and the Paris goals of keeping temperatures below 1.5 C of pre-industrial levels might say that 3 degrees of Fahrenheit warming, which is the 1.5 C basically, it's a little lower than 3 degrees, of warming in Minnesota isn't such a bad deal. It might even be welcome in the winter. But if I told you and I told them that those same degrees of rise will destroy their 401ks if they don't begin to manage them for the change, to future-proof their 401ks, or if the physical health of all species, humans, animals, plants, will suffer as a result of pathogens finding a more hospitable home in a warmer planet, or that there will be a staggering shortage of food for a growing population, and that their children and grandchildren face a future where starvation is a real possibility, and I mean even in the United States. That all said, I want to tell you that I'm an optimist. I truly think we will together figure this out. But we will only be energized to do that heavy lifting if we know the consequences of doing nothing at all, of doing what the fossil fuel companies and their lackeys in Congress want them to do, and that is stall the inevitable so that they can make the most money possible for the longest period of time through means that we know, that science knows, is killing a planet and its inhabitants. Now, let me run through a few of the follow-on effects of a warming planet, and I'll not dwell on the obvious. I will not dwell on the fact that Minnesota has seen, $23 billion catastrophic weather losses in the last 15 years, that home insurance rates have tripled in many areas. Folks know that. They get that. But that economy, the economy of insurance, is one of the first areas where we are seeing outside the laboratory or the television screen or our front window some changes happening in the world of economics. The world's largest reinsurance agencies, that's Munich and Swiss Re, think of them like big gambling operations that take layoff bets from bookies when the bookies don't have the funds to cover the bets that they have taken in. Insurance companies buy insurance from bigger companies, in other words. Those two outfits have recognized that in a changing climate, the old business models of insurance simply don't work. And we all remember this. Back in the day, insurance people were just beating the pavement, knocking on doors constantly, begging people to buy products to insure their homes and businesses. Now, many insurance companies are saying flat no to people who come to them begging to buy insurance because the risk is too great. The actuarial tables show it is too great. Same is true of investment houses and account and asset managers and pension funds. Their risk management folks are operating under a legal fiduciary responsibility to protect the investments of their clients, and they're not investing, and more aggressively, they're divesting from companies that they see as risky ventures with doubtful futures. The same companies that outperformed the Dow and the Standard and Poor's for decades, those are the companies that are, as we say, carbon intensive operations. Now, I want to ask you this. Has anyone noticed that ExxonMobil, the largest of the large, has been removed from the Dow Jones Industrial Index? You ever wondered why? There's a reason for that. It's called stranded assets. A class of assets in a changing world will have no value, though they are still carried on the books, worth trillions and trillions of dollars. I was invited with 100 other climate leaders to the Nobel Peace Prize Conference on Solutions to Climate Change 2 years ago in Oslo. Everybody was there. Al Gore was there. Usual cast of climate characters were there. But the event was dominated not by these very bright people, but by a new player. The financial world was there in force. And when I say the financial world, I'm not kidding around. The world's largest pension funds were there. The World Bank was there. The International Monetary Fund was there. The giant insurance companies were there. And their predictions were chilling and they were exciting. The bottom line, they say, we're dumping stocks in carbon intensive operations, and funders were saying, if a fossil fuel company comes to us to borrow money to build a new refinery or a pipeline, we say no. Go somewhere else if they'll take a chance on you. Now, if they are telling us the world economy is going to shift dramatically, you might want to take your own savings, take a look at that, and find out where your money is and how it's invested, because the bottom is going to fall out, and in pretty short order, because it's already starting to weaken. Is there an element of climate change in the pandemic we're experiencing? The answer is absolutely. As we continue to degrade land for extraction of carbon materials and other important minerals, we're disrupting the lives of animals that have little contact with human beings until late. Thus, animal to human transmission rates are increasing as habitats move into populated areas. We're not done, folks, with pandemics. Zoonotic transmission rates are rising faster than temperatures. Our collective mental health is being degraded by the anxieties of a changing planet. In some areas of the planet, fields once productive have become unproductive. I'm talking about fields where we grow the food we eat. The UN reports that an area the size of Minnesota, of once productive arable agricultural land where we get our food, is disappearing every year on this planet. If we want to feed a growing population, our land management practices have got to change. We've got to change. Our expectations about the food we eat have to change. When the sea ice melts in the Arctic, not only will the planet get warmer still because of the albedo effect that we all know about, the reflecting light off snow and ice, that's reduced. And when it becomes dark ocean, more light means that it will penetrate deeper into the ocean. That means more growth, but it means more growth of seagrasses, which are going to choke out the invertebrates now there. And so the balance of nature gets completely upset. Those seemingly small changes lead to other changes. And we all know what a terrible thing we face when we haven't accounted for the unintended consequences. As I've told you, I have 1,000 of them already listed. 1,000 ways that climate change will affect us that we don't even talk about. And besides the acidification of the oceans from drawing down too much carbon dioxide and turning the oceans into a pool of carbonic acid, destroying fish stocks, which are already plummeting because of the terrible damage being done to the birthplace of the species, many species of fish, hundreds of thousands of species of fish, the coral reefs, with nearly a third of the world population depending on those fish stocks for sustenance. Plastics from fossil fuel in the ocean will outweigh ton for ton fish in the ocean by mid-century unless something is done. What a violent conflict. Will we see more or less of it as a result of a warming planet? Will we see more war? The answer is an absolute yes. The Pentagon and CI planners say as much and much more. And that all becomes from a looming scarcity of arable land. Look, if you can't grow food on the land on which you live because the topsoil has been removed, because it has been washed away, because it has been desertified, you're going to fight for food. You're going to fight for depleted water resources. There are going to be wars throughout this entire globe. And I've listed only a few. And I've said I have a journal for my podcast, Geoversive Earth Intelligence, more than 1,000 ways climate change will affect all species of plants and animals on Earth, our way of living. It is not just weather that we're worried about. It is not simply the 1.5 degrees C of expected warming in the short term, as the concentration of carbon dioxide has just passed 420. And we don't have a lot of time to wake up and begin making changes required to save civilization. Sounds like an overstatement, I know. But do nothing and then report back to me. And what of our agricultural lands? Those people who have always said that they are the closest to the land, the farmers, the best decision makers on what's good for nature. If they continue the same practice of over-fertilizing, using pesticides that kill the pollinators of our food stock, they're telling themselves a lie. And it's not just them. I believe, because I'm a farm boy, they would do the right thing if incentivized. The U.S. Farm Bill is an embarrassment, and it is damaging to nature, and it's damaging to the future of climate change. It rewards overproduction and punishes farmers who would try to preserve topsoil and the prairie and the underplantings that would allow even more carbon to be locked into the soils. Without topsoil, friends, we're lost. We've drained our wetlands. We've created sluice fields for runoff of chemicals. We're poisoning our water. The nitrates in the ammonia hydroxide and in the nitrogens that are being used on these fields in order to feed a growing planet are seeping into our well water. They're hurting people. They're hurting the milk we drink because the cattle drink that. And we're having a terrible time with just over fertilizing. Now that you say that doesn't have anything to do with climate change. Well, of course it does, because you have to get more bushels per acre of the remaining arable land that has been destroyed by the climate change that already existed. An examination began in mid-February when the Yale Environment 360, an online magazine published by the University School of Environment at UMass in December. The study showed that more than a third of farmland in the U.S. Corn Belt, that's us, more than 30 million acres, has completely lost its carbon-rich topsoil due to erosion. 30 million acres of arable land, topsoil completely gone. You can't plant anything in this wonderful farmland that we live on. I'll just give you an example. Iowa, just to the south of us, and I say I could use Minnesota, but I don't have the exact figures on Minnesota, but I do have the exact figures on Iowa. Iowa is losing 5 tons of topsoil per acre per year. Now, I don't know if there's any agronomists with us, but do you have any idea how long it takes to regrow 1 inch of topsoil? It can take up to 100 years. And they're losing 5 tons per acre per year. We don't need a wake-up call. We need actually hundreds of them. Let me take you back to my newsroom days. There used to be alarm bells and things called teletypes. That's where we got our news before we had the internet. And I always listened. Everybody, every trained journalist always listened for the alarm bells that went off on the teletype machines when journalists and editors were alerted to a clear and present danger that had to be reported to the public. But I hear them in my head all day, every day, and it's killing me. Climate change is going to kill me. Maybe not directly by flood or storm, but by the nagging scent that no one is listening in Congress and no one is taking action in the ministries around the world who make those tough decisions. I'm 74 and I'm worn out. But my last breath, I'm going to speak the words, for God's sakes, do something. Vote. Thank you very much for listening to this. Now, I'll take any questions you might have. I wanted to keep this brief. Nothing I hate more than somebody on a Zoom meeting going on for hours and hours and hours. But I've given you something to think about, and I'll try to answer any question you might have about some of these issues that I've already raised.
All right, well, thanks, Don. So Lincoln, if you could set so that people can unmute, and then people, participants, if you would wait till I cue you by putting just a note in the chat that say you want to ask a question.
Now, Steve, I'm going to go ahead and ask, there one question's in the chat, so I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to read it first. I have to look over here. Mr. Shelby, what do you think of putting a price on carbon and returning the funds to the public, carbon fee and dividend? This will help account for the externalized cost of fossil fuels. Those that conserve will come out ahead, and this will incentivize renewable energy. Well, first of all, you have to put a price on carbon, period. The methodology that the Citizens Climate Lobby has come up with and has been instrumental in getting through at least Congress is fee and dividend. And I think it's a remarkable, genius attempt to make this happen, because it will be carbon pricing, but it's revenue neutral. So it doesn't mean that you're going to have to open up a big bank in the central government and redistribute funds. The funds will be distributed to the people. The carbon intensive people will be paying a price, and that price gets redistributed to the people who will be harmed. And so I can't see how the public can possibly turn down the idea of a check coming to them every month or every year that's paid by the carbon intense industries. And the effect will have that on any carbon pricing project, that people who are doing heavy carbon work will find ways, because they want to make money, will find ways to reduce their carbon inputs. And so I think it is a fabulous plan. I support fee and dividend. I work very closely with the Citizens Climate Lobby International. I will be part of their delegation at COP26, and we will be pushing that very hard. But I don't see how even very conservative people will not listen to the public who will say, we want the check for the damage that's being done for dumping into the atmosphere, literally using our atmosphere as a dumping ground for their pollution. They've got to pay in the same way that in the Clean Water Act, when it was written, point source pollution was something that got overlooked. So farmers were, for the pollution that they created, they were exempted, and point source pollution is exempted. So I think it's high time that we change the way we do business in Congress and say, you're going to have to pay for the damage you're doing. Not just the damage you're doing right now, but the downstream damage, which is going to grow by orders of magnitude if allowed to increase. So yes, thank you very much for that, because I am a supporter of the fee and dividend carbon pricing mechanism.
Great answer, Don. And Peter, thanks for that question in the chat. We could take a live question now. Kate, if you want to unmute yourself and ask Don your question.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Hi, Kate.
All right. Hi. First of all, I'd like to recommend that you give this presentation to our Minnesota legislators, because I think many of them need to hear this. But my question for you is, do you think that the local and or national media are doing a sufficient job on covering the climate crisis?
No. The answer is no, they are not, and they're not trained to do that. When I started out in journalism, Kate, we had what was called beats. And I'm sure you've heard the term. So if for a while I was a cop reporter or a courts reporter, and I spent years learning the criminal justice system. Every evening I had a chance to spend with a lawyer was an education for me. And I learned about the law, and I learned about lawyering, and I learned about the criminal justice system from them. And so when I reported on criminal justice, I could speak with some authority based on what I knew. But as I was telling the guys before the event was opened, when climate became an issue for most people to consider, and as I said, I started 30 years ago. Most people who were forced into the business of covering climate at the most was 10 years ago. They covered it as a debate because those journalists went to colleges where they never had to take any science classes. They never had to take any math classes. That's why they chose arts programs, because they probably failed physics. And so they were unprepared. So what happened, Kate, is that in the early years of the climate discussion on climate change, they didn't know anything. So they fell back on an old axiom about balance. So they went over and gave a minute to a person who said that the science of climate change is indisputable. And then they went over to an economist who said it's going to be too expensive, and they disagreed, or it was a hoax or whatever. And they gave equal time and created this image that there was actually a debate. There was no debate. There never was a debate. There were people who said that the science is accurate and it's replicable. And on the other side were people who were paid by the fossil fuel companies, who also carried doctorate degrees in chemistry, who figured out how to cherry pick facts and try to say, almost like the defense case in the Derek Chauvin case. They're trying to pick holes in the overall scheme to try to create doubt. Well, they fomented doubt. In fact, politicians at that time used doubt to try to, in fact, Frank Luntz, one of the great Republican strategists of all time, when George Bush was in office, he was asked by George Bush, tell me whether climate change is real. And Luntz went out and did his homework, came back and said, yes, climate change is real. And Bush said, I don't want anything to do with it, even though his daddy had done something about it. And Margaret Thatcher had done something about it as arch conservatives. He said, I don't want to do anything about it. What should I do? And he said, just keep the public confused. It's in his memo that was read by the White House, and then they formed an entire plan to do just exactly that. Not only did they keep them confused, they kept journalists confused. So now what has happened is you've got specialties. So you've seen this happen right in front of your eyes here with the COVID pandemic. Who's front and center on CNN? Sanjay Gupta, a neurosurgeon, trained medical professional. That's where the news is coming from. So you can trust that. But there really isn't an analog when it comes to climate change. There aren't people trained in climate change on a daily basis on daily news telling you what the facts are. So I gave this example. So let's say 97% of the people who are in the science of atmospheric science and climate and working on climate change issues, 97% of them say climate change is real according to the science. Now that leaves 3%. But 2 of them say climate change is real, it just won't be as bad as everyone says it's going to be. 1 of the scientists says it's a hoax. 1 says it's not true. So it's actually 99-1. So if you were writing a story and using balance, the classical balance that journalism requires, you would write a story that was 99 column inches long saying that the science is accurate, and 1 column inch of a dude saying, no, it's a hoax. But that's not the way it's done, because the reporter cannot deduce for himself or herself the difficult understanding of the science of the matter. And so we're not getting the best reporting. I hope that answers your question, Kate.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes.
Great, thanks. And next up, we have Commissioner Victoria Reinhardt. Victoria, if you would like to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Hi, Commish.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
I'm trying not to be overwhelmed here, and that's what my question is about. I'm very involved in this issue at the National Association of Counties. I'm also on the local government advisory committee for the EPA, so it's a presidential appointment. I'm so glad that we have a president now that cares and wants to do something. And I was on it when I was first appointed. It was under Barack Obama. So the last 4 years have been frustrating, is the kindest way I can put it. But we now have people that really want to do something about this. I was recently appointed, the most recent was just about a week and a half ago, to the Climate Action Task Force that's being run. Thank you. And to represent the National Association of Counties. And what I'm finding at NACO and at even at the Association of Minnesota Counties, that when you try to talk about this issue, people get so overwhelmed and frightened, quite frankly, that they want to put their head in the sand. They want to believe that one scientist because it makes them less uncomfortable or less scared. And I'm trying to figure out, and I do my best at trying to be very calm and letting people know what needs to be done. And if I think something that we have to go in a different direction, I'm pretty bold about getting that message out. I think some of the folks on this call or on this meeting know who I am, and that I don't shy away from controversy. But it's trying to that balance, and I'm wondering if you can give me some advice on because I have a platform to be able to speak to this issue on a national level, at a state level, at a county level. And I want to make the best use of that platform. So I want to get the information out without overwhelming to the point where people will close down.
I bet you
I
have a
think
lot
you
of,
probably understand what I'm saying.
oh, I know exactly what you're saying. I bet you have a lot of farmers in your constituency.
Well, not in my constituency, but in the associations, the National Association, the Western states. I don't think they understand what the word environment means, to be honest with you.
Yes.
So
Fortunately, some of that stuff is changing because the future will be regenerative farming. So that's going to be taken care of because the industry is going to change. It has to change because they're going to be penalized. They're going to change the U.S. Farm Bill with the Biden administration and with the Democratic House. They're going to form a farm bill that will reward the kind of work that needs to preserve nature, and it will reduce or de-incentivize the problems we're currently facing. But let me just get to your point. Appeal to their pocketbook. If and I speak to a lot of conservative audiences, and I very seldom mention science. I very seldom mention global warming. I just mention that the world is changing. And I don't mean it's getting warmer, it's getting colder in Atlanta. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I just say the world is changing. The financial world is changing. And the sustainability of their enterprise, sustainability of their family is based on whether they are going to be a part of a future or they're going to deny the existence of that new future and they're going to be left behind. And you can also tell them that there is money to be made in this new paradigm, money to be made. Now, I'll give you an example. Lars Larson was a friend of mine. He fixed typewriters. And he was in the WCCO television newsroom when we were working typewriters. He was in every day. He worked 8 hours a day, just going around fixing typewriter after typewriter after typewriter. Then we went to all computers, and Lars disappeared. He's a friend of mine. And I didn't see him for 3 years. Then one day, Lars was back in the newsroom, and he was fixing all the computers because he took those 3 years and he reinvented himself to become a computer technician because he didn't say, like, who protested most about the internal combustion engine automobile? Who protested the most to Henry Ford? Buggy whip makers.
Yep.
Buggy whip makers. So you can appeal to those conservative beliefs that they don't have to believe in climate change. They just have to believe in a changing economy. And if they stay in one place, they're going to be left behind. If they want their businesses, if they want their practices, if they want their markets to still be viable, they have to change. They have to move with the times. And there is plenty of money to be made in this new environment. And what I would say is invite them along. Don't look at them as the enemy, the obstructionists. Just say, I don't want you to be left behind. The world is changing. You've got to change with it. And I've had standing ovations. I got a standing ovation on one speech I gave to a business alliance. So they were all conservative business people. And I said, I have a question for you. How did Republicans get on the wrong side, conservative Republicans get on the wrong side of gasoline mileage requirements? How did you allow the environmentalists and Democrats to take over that? Because aren't you conservative? Don't you believe in conserving? If would you drive a car that gets 7 miles to the gallon when you could drive a car that gets 100 miles to the gallon? Look at the money that you would save. You can, with the money that you save with that, or with putting solar on your roof and having distributed energy, or a geothermal to heat your house or cool it during the summer. If you did that kind of investment, look at the money that you'd be saving. What kind of conservative are you who would say, I'm going to spend more money than I did? I'm going to buy more gasoline than I need to buy. I'm going to pay a higher electrical bill than I need to pay. Who would do that? And so you can enlist them by telling them that they can save money and make money, preserve their funds, preserve their fortunes, if they just keep moving in one direction. And they don't have to believe in climate change, not one iota. The bottom line is, and this is really important, Commissioner, that it doesn't matter why you do better for the planet. You can come from a free market economy. You can come from a government mandated economy. But my job as a journalist was only to say this, not to tell you how to behave. I would say, know this and proceed. These are the facts. Now proceed. You can proceed any way you want to, as long as you have these facts, because you can't unsee the facts. So you agree there's a problem. If somebody wants to have a free market solution to it, have at it. If you want a government mandated solution, have at it. It doesn't matter. But if you do nothing, the government will act. And you will be a victim. You will be the victim of a larger government that you don't want, and you'll be a victim of higher taxes, which you don't want, because you have refused to comply with the very basic needs. I'll give you an example of Coca-Cola. Out in Eagan, there's a Coca-Cola plant. It was picked by Atlanta at headquarters as a test site, kind of like Walmart did when they built their first LEED Platinum building. They picked this as a test site, and they said, spend all the money you need to spend to be as efficient as you possibly can. And again, that's a conservative philosophy, efficiency. To some, that means you use the fewest workers to make the most product. That's an efficiency. But that aside, make Coca-Cola the most efficient plant. So what they did was they put in a system where they reused 30% of all of the water that was going down the drain. The next thing they did was they bought a fleet of electric trucks, delivery trucks. They replaced all of their tungsten lights and their mercury vapor lights and all of their warehouses with LED bulbs, powerful LED bulbs. Well, the bottom line was, after a year, when they did the accounting, I was talking to Kevin Morrison, who ran the plant, and I said, what happened? And he said, well, we saved $10 million a year in profits, because we had lower costs on our energy, and we were reusing the water, and we didn't have to buy gasoline. And I said, well, you must feel like a great steward of the planet. Well, he was a businessman. He said, no, he said, I just love the money. So that happened. Walmart did the same thing. Walmart, if you'll remember, we're of the age where every story that appeared about Walmart was that it was a terrible employer. It didn't pay a full wage to part-time employees, and didn't supply any kind of medical health care, and did not allow unionization. Every story about Walmart was mean, until a local woman, I won't tell you her name, a local woman who does work in PR, came in and said, they said, what do we do? And she said, we got two choices. One, allow them to unionize, pay more people, pay part-time employees their medical care. And they said, the hell with that. We're not doing that. And she said, okay, well, let's just change the narrative. And they said, how are we going to do that? She said, next building you build, make it a LEED Platinum building. So they built a LEED Platinum building just because she said so. And it cost about 30% more in construction costs. At the end of it, that building returned $7 million in saved revenue. So now Walmart built every new building as LEED Platinum. And so they're raking in the money. They're raking it in. Plus, not one story since then has said anything about Walmart except how advanced they are in, and it's greenwashing, how advanced they are in energy efficiencies. And then the smart guys at Walmart did a step they didn't have to do, but it's because it's the Walmart system. They went downstream to all of their suppliers and said, you build LEED Platinum buildings. You become efficient. That way you'll charge us less for the products you're making for us. So business prospers when they can think of efficiencies. When the Chamber of Commerce got all over me because I was reporting on all of these things, they thought I was anti-business. Once I had a direct conversation with the Chamber of Commerce of the state of Minnesota, they opened up their own system without using Excel or Centerpoint, their own system of auditors who would go into these giant businesses and say, you can change the way you're doing your business. You can now downsize your motors because the motors that they're using right now have a higher efficiency rate with more HP output. They'll do more work for less money. And so when the Chamber of Commerce said do that, they were saving money for all of the people in the Chamber of Commerce, all these businesses, using efficiencies. So invite them in to the future.
Thank you. You know, I have used that tack in the past. People will probably remember the voter ID constitutional amendment, and it looked like it was going to pass. And one of the things that I did as a Ramsey County Commissioner was I said, I don't care about anything else. Tell me how much it's going to cost. And when we put that out there, the newspapers picked up on it and said, what's the problem? And this is how much it's going to cost. And we were able to change that narrative.
Right.
I hadn't really thought about doing that with this because it seemed so big to me. And so you have given me really great information. And just one of the things that I'd like the group to know about is President Biden and I think it's Senator Starkey have introduced legislation or an executive order by the president on the national equity map that is specifically about environmental justice and climate change.
Yeah.
And so you may want to look at that. I did get that passed at NACO.
Yeah.
So it was a hard thing to get passed there, but we got it done. So
congratulations
really important
to you.
stuff.
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and great answer. Don, thanks for all that detail and those examples. That was perfect. Our next question comes from Judy Lissick. Judy, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, hi, Judy.
Hi, Don. This is just a wonderful presentation. Thank you. Now, after that conversation you just had, my question seems a little minute, but it is back on the Farm Bill. You talked about that you do think it's going to be rewritten. And however, my question really is, I see that Klobuchar and the two senators in Iowa are just presenting this new biofuels infrastructure bill, which means a lot more corn is going to be, for ethanol, a lot more corn is going to be produced. Would you say that is one of the steps that we have to, the journeys we have to go on, or would you say wrong direction, we need to be looking at this differently? Because I have a hard time sometimes supporting Klobuchar's positions when it comes to agriculture.
Well, first of all, look at the realities of the situation. I've known Amy for 40 years, but she is like every other politician in the world. She wants to get reelected. She has to make decisions based on what her electorate wants. And right now, at 200 bushels per acre in these fields that are over fertilized, that are all doing terrible damage to the Mississippi River because of the topsoil loss and everything that I've spoken of, and drainage tiles. There are more miles of drainage tile in Minnesota than there are miles of roads, and all of that dumps directly into the Mississippi River and is killing the Gulf of Mexico. That's another issue. It's not exactly climate change, but she is the first order of business for all political officials. The first order of business is not the welfare of the world, not the welfare of the country, not the welfare of your community. It is getting reelected, period. Period. You believe that if you can get reelected, if you're at the table, then you can make moderate changes over time. But we don't have time. We've got 10 to 15 years to make these massive changes before we get to a point where, I don't want to call it a tipping point, but science does call it a tipping point. We get to a place where it's going to be more and more expensive to mediate, adaptation, resilience, and mediation. I forget resilience and adaptation. We're way past the place where we can adapt and be resilient to the changes that are coming. We've just got to mediate the problem. We've got to stop that problem. Let me just give you a fact on ethanol, which I know you probably know. It takes 8 gallons of fossil fuel input to produce 10 gallons of ethanol. I didn't just make that up. That is an actual fact. 8 gallons of fossil fuel petroleum to make 10 gallons. So you're netting 2 gallons. And if you were to just take the 2 gallons out of the 10, and how much in terms of tonnage is that for mixtures into the stockpile for internal combustion engines, it doesn't amount to a hill of beans. Plus, all of the ethanol programs were put into a place when we were energy dependent, petroleum dependent country. We imported oil. Well, for better or worse, with new developments in going into old wells and using CO2s for enhanced oil recovery, we're actually now pretty set. We don't need the addition of ethanol. And for all of that land that has been completely destroyed, all of the prairie that's been completely destroyed, we're destroying not only the capacity of soil carbon to be locked into the soils and into the plants and the deep roots, prairie grasses for even beef consumption. I know there's a lot of people who probably go, I don't eat beef because that's a problem. I've read that somewhere. Let me just do this little aside. All of the research done on the methanes produced by beef cattle were done on feedlots. All of that research was done on feedlots. If you take cattle and put them into a grass field, you tear up all of the corn and you plant grasses, and then you paddock those cattle so that they eat the grass here, then they move to that paddock, eat the grass here, and by the time they get back to here, there's new grass growing and they're fed. And the beef is not only grade A, it's the best beef in the world, but the methane that is produced in the manures and by the belching and whatever of the cattle outside of a feedlot, the grass attracts it because methane is a heavier gas than oxygen. And there are microbes in the soil that eat the methane and then lock that back into the ground as carbon, which is an essential part of the topsoil. So those practices are going to change. Amy is misguided. All of the people who are being supported by farmers who are getting top dollar on their corn and soybeans, and they are urged to plant more. are actually doing grave damage. And so we are speaking to, at the Citizens Climate Lobby, we are speaking to all of these people and trying to make sense of what that is. But what they have to do is go back home and explain it to the farmer, because for a period of time, they're going to be thinking, you're taking money out of my pocket. This is in essence an unequal taxation. But that's what leadership is about, Judy, is saying ethanol is wrong. Here's how it is made. It's not doing any good for us right now because we're independent and we're not importing oil. And we are destroying the land on which we're destroying the carbon sink, basically. So regenerative farming is the fastest growing of all farming in the world. Not you would think organics is the fastest growing, but regenerative farming is the fastest growing. To the point where you've seen 1 million corn planters up here in Minnesota. By just moving the corn planter over, by leaving all of the stover in the field and not plowing it under, but just moving the planter over 6 inches, so you're planting in the row that didn't have corn the previous year. The rotting of the root system of that corn, the old corn, produces the nitrates, so you don't have to use any fertilizer, and that feeds the new kernel of corn that grows, and the next year you just move it back over 6 inches. So that kind of no-till planting is growing faster than any sector of the economy. And when they change, when they see that is money in the bank and they can get they don't have to spend that money on the nitrogens, they'll realize they're getting a higher price per bushel for their corn, and then they're going to ask that the farm bill be changed. So it's going to be bottom up. But leadership requires Amy to go into these communities and say, no, you're wrong. This is the wrong way to go. And you're harming the planet, and you're not the caretakers of the land you said you were. And that's a tough sell. You say, because they pride themselves on saying, we know best about Earth. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're ruining it. You're ruining the Earth through these systems. And you're ruining the water supply. And you're ruining the groundwater supply for your children and for the animals and the stock that has to drink that water. You're ruining it. And I'm going to call you out if you don't change. And that's a threat that I'm very happy to make, to say, and I spoke to the Farm Bureau 2 years ago, and I called them out. I just said, you're all liars. If you're planting in the old way, you're just a bunch of liars, because you're ruining the land. You're ruining the topsoil. You are not fixing carbon. It is not a carbon sink. You're allowing water runoff to poison everything. Does that make you happy for me to call you that? No, they didn't. And they wanted to argue with me, but they didn't argue very loud because they knew it was true.
All right, well, thanks for that. Great, great answer, Don. And I think we all see that agriculture, the sector for carbon emissions, and is going to be one of the hardest sectors for transitioning to a less carbon intensive economy. We have one more question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
From Lincoln. If you want to unmute and ask your question about corporations.
Hi, Link.
Hi. Well, this is great. I really appreciate your time and your strong voice. One of the issues that I think is too quiet is the need for companies to take responsibility for what they produce, not only from a human health and safety perspective, but also from the packaging that they develop and put out there, and then say, oh, you need to recycle it, when in fact the companies need to take responsibility for what it is that they produce. And how do you work with that?
Okay, first,
what do you see happening there?
Okay, first, that's going to be a grassroots effort, and it's beginning to happen.
Mhm.
But the first thing that I want to tell you is that recycling is a joke.
Yes,
Um,
it is.
except when it comes to like tin cans and things like that. But plastic recycling, unless you'd have to have 50 bins where you were putting certain bottles in this and certain bottles in this and
Yep.
certain bottles in here. Um, about 60%, maybe 70% of the plastic packaging cannot be recycled. It
Yes,
cannot
that's
be
true.
reused in any way. So it
Yes.
ends up in the dump with possibly a 500-year half-life.
Yeah.
And so we're also despoiling all of those dump sites. So I recycle, but I do it very carefully, and uh, I want to make sure that the product that will be made into another product. But at the same time, I have a problem that it's pelletized plastic. There's more pelletized plastic in the ocean right now than you can possibly imagine. There are just megatons of pelletized plastic because it's carried on the wind out of these areas and blown away. Now, so if you look in the trunk of my car, you will see at least 3 dozen reusable net bags,
Mhm.
plus uh, the bags that you carry your groceries in. I have those as well. So when I go in a grocery store, if I'm going through and I'm getting some tomatoes and I'm getting some oranges, they all go into these sort of mesh bags, and they don't weigh anything.
Right.
And I never pull the plastic off of that roller
Mhm.
and put my vegetables in there. I take the vegetables, either put them straight down or I put them in a bag that doesn't weigh anything, so it doesn't add any cost to what I'm doing. Uh, when people are informed that these plastics can't be recycled, um, that the packaging has to change and may come in the form of boycotts, may come in form of mass action, journalism.
Mhm.
Journalism will play an important part in this, uh, but they're so busy covering so many other things that this seems like a small piece. If I were a seasoned reporter and somebody said, "You go out and cover plastic bags," I'd think that was a come down, unless except I know how important it is. But if I were just a daily reporter and somebody told me to do that, that would seem like a story for a rookie. But the story is so deep and so important that uh, already there are effects you can see. But if you went to Target and say, if you package anything in plastic, come Christmas time, if you've got a little doll baby in a one of these unopenable plastic things that are
Yes.
incredible,
Yep.
I have to carry a knife on a sheath knife on my hip, literally, to cut into some of these things because I can't get them apart. If you package anything in there, we're not going to shop for Christmas at your place. Then downstream, there's going to be the same thing at Walmart, because they're these massive retailers. They have immense power that they've never used. So a real quick Walmart example. Walmart says, how much is this product that you're going to sell? And they say, we'll charge you $2.75. You can sell it for $9. And Walmart says to them, no, I'm going to pay $1.95. And the guy said, well, I can't make any money doing that. And then he says, Walmart guy says, how much do you sell in a year? And he says, I sell 2 million pieces. Well, if you put it in Walmart, we'll sell 20 million pieces. Do you think you can make some money off of 20 million? They say yes. And so they charge them $1.65, and they figure out some way down the road. If they said the same thing to these suppliers, that if you want to be in Target,
Mhm.
if you want to be in this grocery store chain, if you want to be in Walmart, you must package this way or we will not display it. We will not sell your product. And so I think that's the next step, is the awareness that they have that power, and coupled with the fact that there would be protest, boycotts, and saying, we'll just not shop there. We'll not buy anything that you sell if it's wrapped in plastic. Because plastic is a problem.
Yeah.
God,
huge
geez,
problem.
it is such a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem that will be with us for millenniums.
And so see, just on the plastics, and when I said that by the turn of the century there'll be more plastics ton for ton in the ocean than fish, that's an actual number that comes out of Woods Hole. They don't biodegrade. Plastic doesn't biodegrade. It photodegrades. Degrading is a good process, but when they photodegrade, they turn into tiny, tiny pieces of plastic, which fish stock and crustaceans believe is plankton, and they eat that,
Yep.
and they die or are poisoned, and that poison is passed along into the food chain. So plastics is an awful, awful problem. Plus, it's a petroleum product. 6% of every barrel that is produced worldwide is used for plastics. So we can immediately cut down on CO2 by just coming with soy-based, sugar-based plastics that are already available in the marketplace. If they just wanted to get plastics that would serve the purpose that the plastic currently serves, but they just use a different kind of plastic.
Mm-hmm. It's
that
biodegradable.
is biodegradable, right? That has a half-life of maybe 5 years.
Well, there's also the problem of plastic in clothes and the whole microfiber
Sure.
issue that is spread even to our pristine boundary waters.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lincoln.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Lincoln, and Don, great answer. Yeah, the communication about recycling plastics is a really important one. The more we can talk to people about that. You know, I teach chemistry at the University of St. Thomas, and I talk to my students about recycling plastic and how, you know, very little of it gets actually recycled, and none of it really gets put back into food packaging. It's not allowed.
Right.
Right.
You go into things like picnic tables, park benches, and flooring and carpet and that type of thing. So
I've got a fence made out of one.
yeah,
I've got a front porch made out of recycled bottles. I've got my entire driveway made out of old milk bottles. Yeah.
So that's always an eye opener for my students when I tell them they can't. All of their drink bottles are virgin plastic. There's no recycled content in there.
Right.
So it's good to get that word out. And again, this has been great, Don. Your presentation was just superb. Your insight and your experience in these things has been really, really beneficial to our group and all our guests as well. So we had a good gathering tonight, and we'll get this posted on our Facebook page and our website, and we'll try to drive more traffic to it as well, because I think everybody should see what you had to say. It was just fantastic.
Well, thank you very much for that. There's nothing more important in my life than speaking on this issue and trying to wake people up. My whole life has just been that. Just present the facts.
Yeah.
And let people then, once they know those facts, proceed with a solution of some kind. But they have to agree on the facts.
Yep. Well, that's what since I retired, that's what I have dedicated my time to also. So thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all.
Lots of thanks coming through on the chat as well, Don.
Yep.
So we'll say goodnight. We're about 10 minutes over what we had promised.
That's my fault.
Our pleasure.
It was really great. We really appreciate all your insight and everything. So
Thank you.
thanks, everyone. And
Thanks,
Thank you all. Wonderful.
Thank you.
thanks.